All right. Today I want to start off with kind of building our first game. Let me get a share screen going. So a game has to have a point. The point is to, I don't know, collect gold coins while avoiding stepping on the poisonous mushrooms. And the uh, the gold coins give us points, and the poisonous mushrooms damage our health. And so we're going to keep score. If you get damaged too much, you'll die. If you get enough points, you win. Simple concept for a game. And I'm going to set this up with basically three scripts. Actually, there'll be a fourth one. And these scripts are going to communicate with each other, even though they're not going to be on the same object. There's no kind of central manager to this game. The three basic scripts are the player status, the damage script, and the pickup script. Um, so we've got a player here, and I'm going to uh, create the player status script. Actually, I've already done this, of course. And I'm going to add it to the player. I'll use the first person player from the standard assets. And in this script, I'm going to create two public variables, one for health and one for points. These can be integers or floats, probably they're integers. And I'm going to create various functions, functions that other scripts will use. The player status script actually doesn't do very much except respond to requests from other scripts. I'm also going to create some functions for the win-lose conditions, things that will happen when we win or happen when we lose. And at some point, I'm going to set up a GUI that displays the status on the screen. At the very beginning, my player status has these public variables. They're integers, health and points. They have default values of 100 and 0. These are exposed in the inspector, and the start and update, I'm just going to leave alone empty at this point. Now, if I were to write this and drag it onto my player and have a look at it, I'd immediately see that the exposed health and points. And I believe I have that over here with my player. Here are the health and points. I also have a debug toggle that as to whether it's going to display something when something happens. I'll turn the debug off for now. The other thing that I'm going to include in there is a public function. Public means that it can be called by other scripts. And it's apply damage, and it has an integer argument, total damage, and it's going to take whatever that is in the health and subtract total damage from it. It's also going to test health to see if it's gone below 0, if it's 0 or less, and if it is 0 or less, it's going to call the kill function. And the kill function at this point is nothing. All it does is type a debug message, you are dead. And that's going to show up in the console down here, the console over here. I'll clear that. It's going to show up in the console over here. Now I need to make a damage object. And so I'm going to have a script damage. And the damage script, again, nothing in the update or the start functions. Those are both empty. But it's going to have a function on trigger enter. Remember back when we talked about colliders, I said you can, there's an on trigger setting for them, is trigger setting. And the is trigger setting means that instead of colliding with the collider, when we pass through the collider and we can enter, exit, or stay in the collider, we're going to uh, do something with that collider. And the on-trigger enter shows you what has collided with the trigger collider. That's what comes here in the COL, is the collider that has collided with my isTrigger collider. And so I want to access the player status script on that object that has entered my trigger. So I have a type player status. That's the class. The player status script class is player status. The variable name is lowercase player status. And I'm going to, on the collider, this collider that collided with it, I'm going to get the player status component. And then I'm going to call a function in the player status script, apply damage. And the amount that I'm going to damage is my argument. Remember back here, this is the input argument here. Total damage is the amount that's subtracted from my character. So I need a damage object. Let me emphasize here. Call is who has entered the trigger. Player status is the variable. It has type, capital player status. That's the class name. And I'm going to get that player status script from the object that's collided with me. And then I'm going to call the function apply damage in that player status script. So I'll also add a public variable at the top there that's going to be exposed. Set a default value of 25. And here's the complete script with the unused start and update functions removed. If you're not using them, take them out. They don't cost anything. So I'm going to make a little firewall here. I've got a little firewall. It's a cube. I've stretched it so that it's a wall. I've put some kind of flame-like material on it, fire add. Here's my damage script. It has a 25 in the slot here. And so if I run this, and let me watch the console over here. If I run this, here's my firewall. Here's my firewall. And I go through this a couple times. There, I've gone through it 4 times. And my kill function is telling me that I am dead. It's a console message. Of course, we'll get fancier with this later. So that's a damage object. Now, the other thing we want to do is have pickups that we can, or power-ups that that will add points to us. And so in player status, I'll write another function, add points. Again, it must be public. It has an argument for the points that we're going to add. Here we add the points. If it's greater than or equal to 100, we'll call the win function. The win function is just a debug log U1. Now, the pickups, the objects that I put the pickup script in, have their own script pickup, and it looks a lot like damage. It has no start or update function. It has an on-trigger enter that's going to get the message back from that trigger. It's going to look up the player status script on the thing that is colliding with the trigger. It's going to call the function add points with its points argument. And then the one difference here, it's going to destroy the game object. And this destroys the game object that the script is attached to. So it's going to destroy the pickup. We do this because if we don't want to be able to pick up the pickup more than once. So I've got a bunch of pickups in here. I've got a bunch of pickups here. Let me start over. So I've got a bunch of pickups up here. Uh, as I run into this, it disappears. Oh, and by the way, the pickup, its collider had to be set, is triggered. I run into another one. I run into a third, and I run into a fourth, and I now have 100 points. So I see the message down here that I've won. So all very cool. Once you've made one of these things, make a prefab out of it. Make sure the is trigger is set, and uh, this all should work. Now, one other thing is a bomb. With a bomb, uh, uh, the bomb script looks a lot like damage, um, but it also looks a lot like the pickup in that it's going to destroy itself. Now, the bomb is a little bit different than the other objects because I want it to be able to roll around in the world, so it has to have a rigid body. Neither the damage wall nor the pickups had rigid bodies in them. They were static colliders. Uh, and the other thing, since I want it to be able to roll around in the world, I want it to have a sphere collider. But I also need a collider that I can collide with that's a trigger. So I've also added a box collider to it. And I've made it a little bit bigger than the object. And so if I look here at my bomb, it has the sphere collider. That's that green line around there. That's what it's going to roll on. And it has the box collider, which is the thing that I'm going to touch when I run into it and trigger uh, the uh, the uh, loss of points. Now, there's one other difference here. Because this thing is going to be rolling around on the terrain, there are going to be constant on trigger enter events with the terrain. The terrain is going to be the thing that it collides with the most. But I only want to, uh, uh, I'm going to do the same thing here and try and get a player status from this. But if the object that it collides with doesn't have a player status, this will come back as null. So my test here, if the player status is not null, then I can call the function apply damage points. And like the pickup, I'll destroy the game object so that the bomb only goes off once. It doesn't happen every time you hit it. So that's a significant difference here in that we're testing to make sure we have a player status before I try and use it. If I didn't do this, I would get null references all the time as this thing, as this box collided with the terrain and it looked for a player status on the terrain, didn't find one, tried to apply damage, and it would be a bad thing. So here's my bomb. It rolls across the landscape, but if I run into it, it disappears. It's gone, and I've lost a certain number of points. If I go over here and pass through the wall a couple times, 3 times, now I'm getting the "you are dead" message. So 25 points for the bomb and 25 for each pass through the wall. It's important to test the player status to be sure that the collider we hit is the player and that it has a player status script on it, since our bomb is continually rolling across the scene. Uh, next lecture, we're going to add heads-up displays. And so 2 other functions that I'm going to add to my player status are 2 public functions, get points and get health. All these do is they return the number of points and the amount of health that I have. And these are callable from other scripts And I will do that in the heads up display script that we'll write next time. So let me summarize here. Note the communication that's going on among the different objects and their scripts. The player has this player status script that assesses the addition of points and loss of health. It keeps track of their current values and potentially can uh, uh, deliver them to another script that requests them. It tests for the win die condition, and it calls the appropriate function that tells the user what has happened, whether they've won or died. The pickup damage and bomb objects, all with their colliders set to his trigger, have these various scripts, pick up damage and bomb, that handle the messages that their colliders, that's the on trigger enter, uh, uh, handles these messages from the is trigger colliders, calling the appropriate functions, add points or apply damage in the player status script on the player. So a lot going on here, and a lot of communication among scripts, and we're going to do this a lot. So in the future here, I'll add this HUD. We'll of course talk about explosions and other shiny objects. But I'm going to stop the share there, and I'm going to end the recording, and I'll see you all in class. Bye.